the ceiling. Picture came and ice, and she said, we are all just prisoners here of our own device. And in the master's chambers they gathered for the feast. They sever with the ceiling as but they just can't kill the bees. Right about here in the story was like checking into Hotel California, because there felt like I had to check in. And so after I got out of bed from crying, I think the first thing I stopped doing was balancing the checkbook. I still don't. I still don't. But I had for years kept meticulously a notation of the checkbook and all the credit card balances and the boat, the 2 mortgages on the house, the car payment, you know, the list of things that we had accumulated in debt, despite the fact of a very large check in the last 18 months, was stunning. And my anger phase kicked in for real. I was so angry at the system, and I was so afraid that I refused to go to work first. I said, I'm going to take some time off. And so I got a lot of money actually to be laid off. I got, probably enough last year and a half just in that. And of course, I cashed out my 401k, I cashed out my pension, and I bought silver. And part of the story that I have to tell in this is that when I created a disruptive pattern, part of that pattern was disruptive because I had to give up the concept of money. And I had been very focused on money up to that point, and it's a very synchronous piece of the story. And so how do you do that? How do you give up money? And the answer was that I had chosen a pattern that would allow me to look at money completely differently. As long as I thought that silver was the next big deal, I would have never looked at any other information. In fact, as long as I was trying to beat the stock market in its game, we would all be. And so part of my lesson was that I'm not going to beat the stock market, and I'm not going to beat the Fed in their game.
You have to buy the dip. If you don't, then you're a fucking idiot. Just buy the fucking dip and you will make money too.
I don't know. I am getting very scared. It feels like we are at the top of the market, and as soon as I start buying the dip, the market will finally crash and I will wipe out what little I have left from being short.
Did you not hear a single word of what I just said? Buy the fucking dip.
Never, ever underestimate the power of a printing press. I also, spent the summer on my sailboat, and that's what I did. I got on the sailboat and I took off. And I spent an entire summer sailing around Lake Michigan. And took the kids to Great America. I wanted to make sure that my kids got to experience that, that park. That was a lot of fun. And we went to Manitowoc on the boat, and we saw the Maritime Museum, and we went and saw where they used to make submarines. And, the Great Lakes has this incredible history to it, including one that involves what was known as the fishing village of Manitowoc, which was along the riverway. Most people don't know this, but the salmon that are in Lake Michigan are not the native salmon to the lake. Commercial fishing decimated the salmon population, and they're extinct. Yeah. These are sort of some of the things that, during this time, Bob, what'd you do? I started gathering information. And so in my mind, I was certain that we were just about on the way to a collapse. And I felt that I could weather, once I had all my savings set aside, up to 4 or 5 years. And as I said in my last episode, the next thing I did was I started writing a book. I started journaling my collapse. And, you know, what's interesting, and I shared the first paragraph in the last video, is that I end this first entry, or first day, last entry of the day, at 11:11 p.m. And I started at 10:10 a.m. And in about 3, 4, 5 episodes, I'm going to tell you about an interview that I did, and I'll post it. And I'll tell you about an interview that I did that had a great synchronicity with this start date. But you know, at the bottom here, I wrote no regrets. And as I look back, I have to question, given what my family and I went through and what I put my family through, and what I'm still going through, what we're all going through. Do I regret any of it? Because it's not all roses and blossoms. It's, you know, I'm a flawed person, as we all are. And I've made terrible mistakes and done things that I wondered, why? What was the driver? And the answer is, that's the purpose of these videos. That's the purpose of this book. It's the purpose of our experience, is to learn and to grow and have no regrets. And I was surprised in 2014 when Tom DeLonge came out that one of the posts he posted was that he had no regrets. I'll post it when I find it in the book in the story time. But when I looked at that, I went, that's very interesting. No regrets. Why? Well, you did this to yourself, Bob. Everything coming up, you were sure you were going to do because it had to happen. And so it was a very interesting fall because depression also set in. So I was sleeping in, drinking early, playing video games all day. But I also started recording my ideas and my thoughts. And in back in my early GE days, one of the things that GE embraced was this thing called Six Sigma. And Six Sigma is a way to break down and uncover errors in a system and to correct problems. Six Sigma is to say that you discover what's going on to such a high fidelity that you can correct all of the errors out of the system to a very high degree. And that percentage is like 0.00 whatever it is. I'll put somewhere in here. What Six Sigma means, it means there are very, very, very few errors. They use this type of system for air traffic control because you have to have very, very few errors because there's so many lives on the line. I didn't ever go through the program, but I did do some research on it at the time. I looked at it. I read through what it was, what it meant. I mean, I didn't have to go to the class to go, well, if they say there's value in this, you know, let's at least try and look at what it is. And the first piece of it is define, right? The first piece is define. And I thought I had defined what was going on, which was the cataclysm. But, you know, in the back of my mind, I was formulating that I needed to make sure that I kept my eyes open enough. And so in the first, day or so, or 2 days of entries, on that was on the 7th. On the 7th, I acknowledge I'm watching, material on UFOs and on the UFO question, which is just me naturally doing what I do, which is data collection and looking for similarities. And I only look for similarities really subconsciously. I store the data, and then when I come across it again, things match up and I crisscross. And so the UFO story loomed large on this, but the thing that caught my eye most was what I wrote on 11/8. Oh, no, hold on. Sorry, 11/9. 11/9. Yeah, so that had been Wednesday last week. 10 years ago, Wednesday last week. And it's an interesting entry, and so I'm just going to read it and talk about defining what's going on. I have two choices. I can continue to follow the collapse or go get a job. I figure all things being equal, I can hold out another 3 months. This was one of the hopes I hold out for. It's also the only way I am going to pay for my closing prep. This thing could definitely drag on for years more.
You have to buy the dip. If you don't, then you are a fucking idiot.
As certain as I am of the collapse, I am far less certain of the time. But I do believe God is watching over us. I am especially fortunate. Not only do I have someone looking over me, but we have gotten pretty good at communicating. One important thing I'm learning is that learning is made much more fun, and life is so much more enjoyable if we simply take that knowledge and do the most with it that we can. And so I present for future approval, and this one I stick the price of Apple in there. And we can see where that is, I suppose, someday if we'd like. But, from the start of being laid off, I acknowledged that I needed more data on what was going on. And once you have the data, the M in DMAIC is measure. And my book was about collecting and recording the data. And so I did. I spent a lot of time looking at news and alternative blogs and exploring YouTube for all of the new information that it presented. And at points along the way, I began to measure what was going on. And it just occurred to me that there was something that I was missing. There was something that I just hadn't grasped onto yet. And so we're into the fall, winter of 2012, going into 2013. And I'm sitting in my basement with a friend, we'll call him Buck, and we're watching the Super Bowl. And I'd gotten an email about the next St. Croix County Republican Party caucus. And I got it a couple of days before, thought about whether I wanted to attend or not. I don't know why I would do something like that, I thought to myself. And as I was sitting next to Buck, an old political ally of mine, I went, ha! I'm going to start a Libertarian Party in the county. And so next week I'm going to talk about the start of the Libertarian Party, Pierce St. Croix. Remember, all is learning, all is benefit, all is growth. We have to shake off certain ideas. And giving up the premise that money is important had to happen for me. In many ways, the family went through a Kafkaesque metamorphosis. We had become greedy and truly disconnected with what made people happy, which is the authentic relationships, the beauty, and the friendships that I've developed in the last 5-6 years. And we're on our way to those stories. I thank you for your time this week, and I hope that you have a blessed fall. And if you could take just one moment and just give me a moment of silence for someone whose birthday is yesterday. 2 of them, actually. A lot of Scorpio season again. Peace.